Hi, everyone. I hope you all have a fantastic day. My name is Dr. Z. I am a clinical psychologist specializing in transgender care. Welcome to my channel. If you're new to my channel, make sure you subscribe. If you have not yet subscribed but are regular on my channel, please also make sure you subscribe. All of you, by subscribing, are supporting me and my content. And as a result, you're helping a lot of other people find this much needed information. And last but not least, if you have not yet followed me on Instagram, link is below. Make sure you do so. Again, you're not only going to be supporting me, but you're going to help other people get access to this content. And Instagram is where I show up daily. I share tips, guidance, as well as do weekly Q&As. So please make sure you go ahead and follow me on Instagram. Having said that, don't forget, I am giving out my book on new terms, Gender Transition Redefined for Adults, completely for free in PDF format. Link is also below. All you gotta do is put in your email and you get a free PDF guide of a copy of my book, no strings attached whatsoever, other than your email, but you can always unsubscribe from my newsletter. Having said that, today, what we're going to be talking about is whether your mind can make up having gender dysphoria. Can your mind make up that what you're feeling is gender dysphoria? Can your mind also convince you and make you believe that you are trans or non-binary? Now, I covered this topic a long time ago, and I broke it down into particular demographic groups, and I talked a lot about how this is more possible with younger adults, and I explained, and I will slightly reiterate it in this video as well. Before you all freak out, in case if you are watching this and you are in a place where you are not certain, maybe feeling some confusion, maybe feeling some apprehension, and you're not fully sure, and you're looking for that clarity, and now you stumbled on this video and you feel like this is going to just further confuse you, make sure you stick around. I will give you very important steps you can take to help you clarify things. Okay, so being confused, for starters, let's address that, is common, it is normal, it is natural. Not everybody's going to know for sure that what they're struggling is with gender dysphoria. Not everybody's going to know for sure what their gender identity is. And that's primarily because, well, first of all, gender dysphoria, in terms of how we understand it, has shifted and changed in its definition over the years. Some people still think that the discomfort they feel is not enough to qualify for gender dysphoria. And they feel that they need to have that extreme level of discomfort from way back in the past, when people said you really must absolutely hate parts of your body, you really must absolutely desire and have a strong wish to rid yourself of those body parts. And the reality is that that's a narrative that a lot of people had to stick to in order just to get access to gender affirming care. The truth is, gender dysphoria ranges, and it ranges incredibly drastically. It ranges from very, very mild, almost non-detectable discomfort to incredibly severe discomfort. And the reason why it ranges is because all of you are very different. The way you're organized, the way your mind works, whether you are anxious or more depressive type, or have predisposition more toward looking at the worldview as through anxious, depressive, or neurotic lens, let's put it that way, what your support system is like, how old you are, where you're living, where you grew up, all of those things are going to play a very significant role in how you are going to experience gender dysphoria. Some people who have more support, some people who have somebody they can actually talk to, may experience a very different understanding toward their gender than those people who don't have any of that. So that's the first thing I want to point out, is that gender dysphoria in of itself is something that a lot of people not really certain whether they experience or not. So having some level of confusion about whether you have gender dysphoria or not is normal. Very rare people are 1000% sure. Even a lot of my clients that have had gender dysphoria since their childhood will come to see me in my office, even though they spend decades and decades living in discomfort, they still ask me to confirm whether what they have been feeling for decades is gender dysphoria. So let's just start there. If you're feeling confused and you're not sure if what you're feeling is gender dysphoria, that element of confusion and uncertainty is natural, normal. That's part of the process. I just want to assure all of you, because I know it can be very difficult living out there without any support or any access to gender specialists and not really having that clarity. Now, apart from that confusion of whether you do what you experience is gender dysphoria, can your mind actually make this up? And more importantly, can your mind convince you that you are either trans or non-binary? The very simplest answer is yes. And the reason why the answer is so simple is because our minds are beautiful, complex machines, absolutely capable of not only convincing us of things, but capable of creating justifications and rationalizations for why certain things happen. For example, think back at any part in your life when you were really maybe obsessed to the point of obsession with something. Perhaps it was getting a tattoo. Anybody has that experience? Well, I have that experience. I'd say probably 5, 7 years ago, when I really wanted a tattoo, I was able to convince myself that it went along with my style, that it really was part of how I want to present. I went to as far as actually making an appointment for consultation. And then something's happened in my life. I got too busy, time passed. Now here I am. When I look back, I'm thinking, what the heck was I thinking? It's really not my vibe, not my cup of tea, which, by the way, I absolutely love tattoos on people. But for me, I realized that back then, what felt so certain that it was for me turned out that it is not. And I'm sure all of you have things in your lives that you can remember when you really, really got quite obsessive about something and you were so sure. Your mind played such a phenomenal trick on you, where your mind rationalized and turned everything to face that obsession, where you strongly felt that this was absolutely for you, or that that was exactly what you needed at a particular moment. This is why the answer is so simple, in a sense of yes, our minds can and do that. Now, bear with me again. I know that some people are sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, is my mind actually making this up? And I'm going to give you a ton of clarity and, most importantly, tips on what to do in case if you are in that position when you are not quite sure. So that video that I did a while back, where I broke people into groups, and I broke people into groups of age group, I believe it was 18, because I worked with adults. So it was 18 to about 27, 28, and then 28 and 30 and up. And the reason why I broke it into the groups is because, first and foremost, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that is very essential when it comes to long-term decision making, and the part of the brain, that's the part of the brain that is able to foresee and acknowledge and understand that there might be consequences out of a particular action we are going to take. Well, that part of the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until 25, 26, 27, and even as far as 28 for some individuals. This is why we see people who are 21 and all the way up to 27, 28 still drink and drive. And some of you look at them and think, what the heck are you thinking? You're old enough to realize this is dangerous. You're putting yourself and others at risk. Well, the reason why they engage in this behavior is because the prefrontal cortex is not yet fully developed. And so all they're seeing is now, and they're not really consciously thinking about how that's going to lead to the fuller long-term consequences. This is why I broke it down into age group primarily, because of the prefrontal cortex. Apart from prefrontal cortex, younger adults who especially have not had onset of gender dysphoria in childhood. What I mean by that is this: you're 18 and up, and suddenly, out of the blue, you have never felt any kind of gender incongruency whatsoever, but suddenly, out of the blue, you start feeling gender incongruency. You're starting to question your gender. You start feeling uncomfortable. You're starting to gender bend. For people where it happens out of the blue, it doesn't necessarily automatically means you're not transgender nor non-binary, nor any other gender identity out there, it doesn't also not mean that you're not experiencing gender dysphoria. What it means is that because it is so sudden and it misses that element of developmental history dating back to childhood, which again is not a necessity, but it does still shed some light on perhaps why you're also feeling confused. It warrants a little bit more time to explore why out of blue. And I think that's reasonable. And I think that all of you who suddenly experience dysphoria owe it to yourself to ask yourself why suddenly out of the blue you feel the way you do. And I think if you're not asking yourself those questions, I think you're missing out on giving yourself that opportunity to explore and to understand yourself better and to understand why you may feel the way you do. Again, it does not mean you may not experience, or what you're experiencing is not gender dysphoria, nor that you're not trans or non-binary or any other gender identities out there. It just means that some exploration is warranted. Now, um, gender dysphoria, what you have to also understand, and I covered it in a video, I think a couple of weeks ago, where I talked about that gender dysphoria does not automatically equals that a person is transgender. I'm using transgender as a big umbrella term here. And the reason why it doesn't automatically equals is because people, for example, cis people do experience gender dysphoria. People who have had history of severe sexual abuse and have body dysmorphia experience gender dysphoria. The important thing here is to understand what is the root issue, what is the root cause, where is it stemming from? So that's another thing. So if you are experiencing gender dysphoria and you're not sure what the root cause is, and suddenly, let's say hypothetically speaking, the root cause has nothing to do with gender identity. Let's say hypothetically speaking, you've been struggling with body dysmorphia for a while, and there's especially particular body parts that are already tied to secondary sexual characteristics that you've been deeply uncomfortable with. So you've been experiencing this dysmorphia, and now you start to question yourself, is it possible that I'm trans? Because I've been uncomfortable with, for example, my chest, for example, just to give you an example. And over the time, you start thinking about it more. Then you go on internet, you start searching, and you go down that rabbit hole of obsessiveness. And that's how your mind starts seeing what you see out there and basically feeding it into your internal questioning and creating a web of puzzle that feels like it exists, but in reality, it does not. Again, our minds are they can really make us feel so convinced, so certain this is who we are, this is what I want, this is for sure, absolutely, I'm going to love it. Again, just think back at anything in your life. It could have been something as simple as maybe a while back ago, you perhaps you have changed your haircut drastically and you were so sure this is going to be it for the rest of your life. And here you are with completely different style, right? It could be as simple as that, but that just should give you an idea of how we're strongly capable of convincing ourselves of things when in reality, that's not really the case. Our minds do this all the time, all of the time. Anytime we want something, if you really, really want, for example, to buy a particular car, just to give you an example, another example, you will start looking for all kind of little explanations, all kind of scenarios that feed and convince and justify your desire to want it. And in a matter of a few weeks, you're going to be very certain that that's the car for you. Again, that's just what we do as human beings. Now, gender is a complex thing, right? It's not a car. Gender is much more multi-layered, and especially when it involves irreversible things such as hormones and such as surgical treatments, it becomes a really serious decision making. So, yes, to keep it short, your mind absolutely can, and for a lot of people, does convince them that they are experiencing gender dysphoria, that it is related to gender issue, and that they are trans or non-binary or any other identity. We already know this. We have a ton of detransitioning young adults who express it, who say that, look, at that point, I truly thought this was my identity. And I got really enmeshed with a lot of other people out there and with a lot of other people narratives. And I felt like my narrative was very much similar to theirs. And now in retrospect, I see it is not. So we already know it is highly possible. As I promised, I'm going to now give you some of the ideas. If you are watching this and you are not sure, you constantly are thinking, you either fall into one of few categories. You either just not sure, feeling some level of confusion, questioning whether this is real for you. Two, you might be literally asking yourself inside of your headspace, am I making this up? Is it possible that I am, by thinking about it so much, or is it just possible that my mind is convincing me that this is so, when in reality it is not? And if you're experiencing any level of confusion or uncertainty, okay, so any of that is going to cover it. The first way to feel more grounded and have more clarity on whether what you're experiencing is gender dysphoria stemming from gender identity root issue. And here for means something is happening with your gender identity that you really need to look at, that maybe you're not comfortable with, that you're feeling that incongruency. The first thing is look at your history. Do you have an early onset? A lot of you do. If you do have an early onset, what does that early onset looks like developmentally throughout your lifespan and throughout different domains? Meaning, what does it look like when you first started to experience it? Now, some of you might have experienced it as young as 4 or 5. Some of you experienced it prior to puberty. Some experienced it when puberty kicked. That's when our bodies change, and that's when secondary sex characteristics become very prominent. And that's also is a very big tipping point for a lot of young adults, because that's when they become very aware of how the bodies are being gendered. So look at the starting point. When did you first experience any kind of discomfort? Forget about thinking about it as severe dysphoria. Just ask yourself, when did I felt any kind of discomfort with my gender assigned at birth? Now, ask yourself, how long has that discomfort continued? And try to see if you can get or can at least understand. Ideally, it would be wonderful if you're able to work with a therapist, gender therapist specifically in your area, to find out, has any of that discomfort, what is it tied to? What is the root cause? Is it really gender identity, or did suddenly something happen to you at that point? Could it be that you experience absolutely no discomfort and were comfortable in your gender, and suddenly when your body started to change through puberty and everybody started to now put the social expectations on you in regards to the gender you started to present yourself to be, that it started to feel really uncomfortable and you don't like the discomfort? So look at it through that lens. For individuals who have a longer history of onset, it tends to fall into, I hate to classify it like that, but but we would say, clinicians would say, more classic, if there is one, more classic case, meaning early on, people they just knew, and it continues throughout their development. So that's the first things that you can do if you're feeling that confusion. Now, apart from that, another most important thing you can do is take things slow. I preach baby steps on this channel all of the time. And it is not because I don't want any of you to be happy. It's not because I don't want to alleviate your suffering and distress. I do. I absolutely do. But for those of you who are not sure, who are feeling very confused, or for those of you who just suddenly realized and now you feel like, is it possible that my mind is making it up? Take your time. Look, slow does not mean you have to wait 5, 6 years for clarity to come. Slow means start exploring. Jump in the very deep end of a pool of social exploration, meaning play around with how you express yourself, what role you take on, how you navigate the world. Try to play around with pronouns. Try all of those things. Just try to see how it feels long term. And that's ideally is going to either affirm you, or after some period of time, you're going to realize that this is not for me, just like anybody else who gets obsessive about that too. After some time realizes it's not for me, right? Some people, in fact, will get one of those fake tattoo stickers just to give it a shot to see what it feels like as a confirmation. So try it on, explore, and see how it feels. What I also highly, highly recommend is try to eliminate um, your exposure to a lot of online groups, Reddit groups, Facebook groups, social accounts, Instagram, TikTok, where you're being exposed to a lot of trans people narratives. Now, it's great to be exposed to those narratives as a level of support. When you are feel pretty confident in your identity and you're moving forward with whatever it is you're moving forward, maybe you decided you want to transition, maybe you decided you don't want to transition, but you're still moving forward with your authenticity. That level of support is very valuable. But when you're feeling confused, following a lot of those accounts is exposing yourself to a lot of noise out there that has very little to do, perhaps, with your case. It is very easy to get enmeshed and to collude with other people's narratives and to feel as if those narrative fits your narrative to a T. And even if it feels like it fits to a T, it doesn't mean that you have to do exactly what other people are doing out there, because you have to figure out what's important for you. There are a lot of gender diverse people online who are very forward to their advice giving, and very forward to put themselves in a position where they really literally telling people, oh, if you do this, if you're feminizing, you're definitely trans. If you have gender envy, you're definitely trans. If you just even thinking about your gender, you're definitely trans. And all of that is not helpful, and it is not accurate. Because what a lot of people are doing, and I'm sure they mean and intend well, is they're projecting what it was like for them. So they're projecting that if somebody says, oh, if you're feminizing, you're definitely trans. What they're saying is that I feminized and it turned out that it was tied to my gender identity issue. And now I have transitioned or transitioning or living my life as a, feminine self. So that means definitely trans. But what they're saying is for me. It doesn't mean that this is true for you. People project their, I have like a fly in my office, people project their opinions all of the time. All it is their experiences. Those experiences are only true within subjectivity that they have experienced it. They're not going to be true for you because no two people are alike. So it's important to hear the people narratives and create a distance, so that way you can have enough buffer space to figure things out for yourself versus getting very colluded with what they're saying out there. So this is the three most important things I would recommend for anybody who's watching it and who is feeling very confused or not sure, or think if your mind is making this up, is one, see what is your onset. Can you trace it along your development and across domains? Can you work with a gender therapist in your area to help you clarify? Two, um, can you also jump toward more social exploration? Take those small steps and give those steps time. Most importantly, gives them time to see how it feels, right? It's really important to do that, because even though our mind may convince us that, yes, I definitely want that haircut and it's going to be haircut for life, when you do get that haircut, in the beginning, you may still be convincing yourself and telling yourself, oh, yeah, this is great, this is great. But if it wasn't for you, eventually, after some period of time, you're going to feel it. Because every time you're going to look at yourself, you're going to say, wait a second, that's really not what I had in mind. And that's the same thing with gender. For people who are not sure, for whom their mind is actually making it up and playing tricks, that's how it's going to pan out. You're going to start presenting and you're going to start exploring, and it's going to feel very incongruent for you. And that's very telling. Least but not last, make sure you shut down as much as you can noise out there. Be very selective what account you follow. Be selective in the sense of, do you feel like they're giving you information that helps you, Understand yourself better. For example, this video, right? I'm not telling you what your identity is. I'm saying that, yeah, it's possible mine can convince you of your identity. And here's, in the very least, three things that you can start doing to start exploring where you're at. So look for those type of content creators who take it further, who are giving you some steps, some guidance, some things you can take versus being overly this is the way it is, or being overly, I would say, guesstimating things and generalizing them to everybody else. So those are the three most important things that you can do. If I induced any level of anxiety in anybody watching this who already felt it in regard to their gender identity by watching this, because now you're feeling like, oh shit, now I'm even more confused. Take it from me as a psychologist. If your anxiety just went higher up, that anxiety is also telling you something. It went up for a reason. Because there's a lot of you that have watched this video and have thought you can sit all the way through zero anxiety. Why? Because you already aligned with your core selves, or because you already know you've been dealing with dysphoria for decades and decades. And so you can watch back and you can go, yeah, that's true. Our minds can make it up. In my case, it's definitely historically has been consistent and persistent, and that's a fact in of itself. So if you're feeling more anxious than ever, ask yourself, what is that anxiety telling you? Where is it coming from? Why are you feeling anxious? Anxiety is like somebody knocking on your door. It's a warning sign. It's basically saying, hey, you're really worried about this. So if you're really worried about this, let's examine it further. That's all it is. It just warrants more examination. Comment below, let me know what your thoughts are, if you've been in this position, or if you experience a similar phenomenon. Well, I wouldn't say similar, it's different, any phenomenon where you mind felt like it was really for you and it turned out not. And I will see you all next time. Goodbye.